Coming to you from fabulous Las Vegas.
The right side is the winning side.
The late move is the correct move.
Sports betting capital of the world.
We all know when a sharp like me weighs in, the lines move.
It's a party for your ears. This is The Buffet with Chad and Scooch.
I want to buy that guy a buffet.
Hello and welcome to The Buffet with Chad and Scooch from the Action Network. I am Chad Millman with the Action Network. On the phone with me from New Orleans, representing all the Boyd Gaming books in the state of Nevada, is Bob Scoochie, who is going to talk as soon as I'm done with the rundown of what's on the show today so people can stay tuned and be excited. Because after Scooch and I are done talking, Ryen Russillo of ESPN fame and now podcast fame, and who famously left ESPN earlier this year, is going to come on. He's going to play You Bet Your Life, talking about the biggest risk he's taken in his life. How much you want to bet? We can figure out what the answer to that one's going to be. And so that'll be interesting. Scooch is going to talk to me. We got a lot to talk about. It's Super Bowl's done, but we still got a lot to talk about. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
Wow. That's interesting how you changed the tone in your voice, because literally 30 seconds ago before we started recording, you were like sleepy drunk post-celebration of your 2-year anniversary of your engagement that happens to coincide with Valentine's Day.
Yeah. No, I made a quick turnaround there. Yeah, there was lots of wine being drunk last night, so it was a little bit celebratory evening.
Jeez, it's like the tone in your voice and like what you were trying to get at with the tone in your voice and like, yeah, celebratory evening. Like, yeah. Come on, man.
What do you want me to say?
Where did you go out? What'd you guys do? What'd you and Jen do? Your beautiful bride, Jen. What'd you guys do?
Oh, went out to a nice dinner, opened up some wine, came back home. Opened up some more nice wine. Went up to.
Go ahead.
No, just went up to our cigar room / wine room, and I mean, you know, I guess you could figure the rest out.
Oh, hold on. I'm trying to wrap my head around the wine room and the cigar room first. And then I can move on to the rest of the visuals. But I didn't realize that it was a wine room and a cigar room in addition to a courtyard in your Italian villa. Yeah.
Well, so we really did up this room pretty nicely. I mean, it's all coffered wood ceilings and big kind of entertainment center in the middle with the whole Sonos sound system and just wood paneling, and it really looks nice, but it's separate from the rest of the house. So, you know, when I smoke my cigars, there's no smoke that gets in the rest of the house. But as we were doing it, we realized there had to be a lot of wine being drunk there too. So we had to put in, the wine cooler, the bar, the whole thing. So she calls it the wine room, and I call it the cigar room. So it's the wine / cigar room.
What do you mean it's separate from the house? Like, it's separate wing? Does it have its own atmosphere? Like, what is it?
Yeah, from the courtyard, you just go up the stairs, and it's kind of a separate type of a casita that has its own HVAC and own air and heat, so it doesn't. The vents aren't connected to the rest of the house, but you get there through the courtyard, so it's separate, but it's part of the same property.
You are living the life. I don't even think I truly understood how luxe your life really was.
Come on.
I don't understand it. I have water in half my basement. I have I don't have a cigar room or a wine room. I don't have that.
You don't have that? You don't have a little separate room? Do you have a man cave? Do you have a little place where you can go with alone with your thoughts and Anything like that?
Yeah, it's called the bathroom. That's.
Oh no.
That's what most people who don't have courtyards and casitas do. No wonder, like, you're so happy in your marriage. You guys are living like in a lap of luxury, and like, Jen's kids are older, so they're not really like, a hassle, and like, yeah.
Oh, things are good. I'm not complaining. I mean, I would have liked to have won the Super Bowl, but that you take what you can get.
I can't decide who's having a better life, Scooch or Mrs. Scooch.
She's very happy, at least she tells me. So, I think we're pretty happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you said it. You're like, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Wine room.
So 3 years on the engagement last night, and then it'll be 2 years in April.
Nice work. Congratulations on that. You're making a go of it. Really, really impressive.
Yeah. Right?
You have
overcame the odds. I overcame the odds on that one, didn't I?
You really did. I mean, I can remember talking about it on the podcast many years ago when you broke up with a woman who's had a 7-year-old daughter, and something about like the daughter was interfering with you being able to watch a USC football game.
Yeah, it was the night that the USC played Fresno, and I remember that Reggie Bush big run that still makes the highlight reels. But SC was like a 20-something point favorite, and they were down big. And yeah, she was not letting me watch that game, and I knew it kind of wasn't going to work out.
Does Jen know that story?
Yes, she does.
How early in your relationship, this is a good barometer, how early in your relationship did you tell her this story?
So I think that's what makes our marriage work, is because we talked quite a bit, even when we were just friends before we actually started dating. So she knew a lot of these stories before we even got together. So it wasn't a big surprise. And, we met at work. So we kind of knew a little bit about each other's, lives before we started dating. So, yeah, she knew that story.
It's a beautiful Las Vegas casino love story.
Yeah, right.
It really is. Oh, my God. That's so I feel like the risk calculus on her marrying you was decreased because she knew all of your challenges and idiosyncrasies before she walked down the aisle. And it was a beautiful aisle, by the way. I remember being at the wedding. That was a wedding. That was like you guys coming in on that boat, and like sunny and beautiful. Like that was a day.
It was classic. And you're being very kind when you say idiosyncrasies, because she calls it my craziness, because she says, yeah, not too many people can put up with all your little crazy things. I'm pretty particular, and she puts up with quite a bit. I'll give her that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that too. Hey,
so
go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick. I mean, the first day I ever spoke with her before I actually met her was on the morning of the NCAA tournament. It was that Thursday of March Madness, about 10 minutes before the games were tipping off, and I was as busy as ever. It was the first year that we had taken over all these new properties at the Coast properties, and bets are flying. The screen is lighting up like crazy. The people are in line, and I get a call. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning, and she was working compliance, and said, "Hey, my name's Jennifer, and we need to get together for some Title 31 training on your staff." And I was so, like, I had no idea. I was so mad that, like, what to say to this person. I was like, do you know how busy I am right now? Is it possible just maybe we can kind of put this off, like, I don't know, another week or two? And she always said I was as nice as can be. So maybe you talk about putting on that other voice, I was a lot nicer, I guess, in real life than I was in my own head.
I think that's always the case with you, Scooch. You probably are like the kind of guy who in your head you're thinking, oh my God, I was such a jerk to this person. And like on the outside, they would think, oh my God, that Bob Scucci is the sweetest guy.
Yeah, it must be.
All right, listen.
All right.
We got to get to a little action.
Okay,
Don't forget,
sure.
Ryen Russillo is coming on the podcast after this. And one of the things we're going to talk about with Ryan is NBA and sort of how you assess the league after all the trade deadline stuff. And Scooch, I think that's what I want to talk about with you as well, because the Cavs all of a sudden make these trades. They've been a team that had been horrible against the spread all season long, a team whose, probably implied odds were significantly lower than even the bookmakers were giving them credit for to win the title. And they make this trade, and all of a sudden, for 2 games at least, they're world beaters and playing better defense and looking like a much different team. So tell me about all your Cavs adjustments as soon as the trade happened, and then what you've done in sort of the week since.
Yeah, when the trades first happened, we knew it was going to be a completely different team. But as far as adjusting like the futures, we were a little, hesitant to make a big adjustment because we still wondered, how the team was going to play together. Right out of the gate, they look great, like you said. And that's when we actually started getting the money on the futures. It was after the first game. So I think a lot of the betting public were a little skeptical too on whether or not they had enough to kind of compete with teams like the Warriors and the Rockets down the road. So the money came in after the first couple games, I would say, but initially we were a little hesitant.
Well, so what have you adjusted them to now?
So we're down to 7-1 on them, and at one point we were as high as 15-1. And then right after the trade, we went down to about 12-1, and then after the first game, we went to 10-1, and now we're down to 7-1.
Is that because did you, as they say in the business, move it on air, or did you adjust because of liabilities?
The first move we made on air, just right off of the trade, just to respect the new players a little bit right out of the gate before they played. Then the second move was after the game, and then the third move was on some bets that came in. So it was a combination of all three, and we're still getting pretty decent action on some other teams. So it's not like they're just all coming in on just the Cavs right now.
Well, who else are you getting action on right now? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the Rockets are getting quite a bit actually, and we don't do real well on the Rockets. I said, out of some of the other teams, we obviously do the best on the Warriors because they were such a prohibitive favorite throughout the year. The Celtics kind of crept up on us a little bit at the beginning of the year, but we still do okay. But the Rockets are, we're down to 4-1 on the Rockets, and we don't do real well on them.
Well, you mean because there's just such a huge liability on them right now?
Yeah, exactly. Just on the futures. I'm just talking specifically just with futures.
Are there certain teams right now where you feel, it's a little bit like the NFL, only it happens at hyperspeed. Certain NBA teams where you feel like you haven't made adjustments to their lines quick enough?
After the fact, I'll go back to the Rockets. Yeah.
Hold on. Let me rephrase that question.
Yeah.
In the NFL, you're very slow to make changes on your power ratings because you don't want to over-adjust. So it could be half a season before you've really made a full adjustment on a team, like the Rams this past year, right? So what is the comparison for the NBA? How often and how quickly are you making adjustments on teams in the NBA because the volume of games is higher?
We hardly make adjustments. Let me put it that way, especially if you want to compare it to the NFL. The NFL, every single week when the games kick off, kind of take down the odds. We start watching the games, and then we repost the odds based on how that week's games are going. And then that's going on throughout the entire season. You can't do that game by game with basketball because there's too many games. And with the NBA, especially in the last 10 years, it's kind of like you have those 6 contending teams that are kind of the favorites at the beginning of the year, and they pretty much stay the same, and they haven't changed very much. It's very rare in the NBA that we're going to get a team that started the season 60-1 and ended up playing in the finals. I mean, I can't remember the last time I think it happened, and it really doesn't really count because it was when the Celtics got Garnett and Pierce, and it was a completely different team from the off season. So I don't think the NBA is very comparable to the NFL in terms of how we move the future. So it's rare that we make big adjustments.
But I was actually talking about power rating adjustments on the teams game by game. So, from a spread perspective.
Yeah, and a couple of our guys that we use as consultants have a couple of different methods of adjusting their power rankings. Like some of them will take the final score, the margin of the final score versus the point spread. So like from 1 to 4 points, if they cover the spread from 1 to 4 points, it gets adjusted by half a point in the power ranking. If they cover the spread by 5 to 10 points, it gets adjusted by a point in the power rankings. And then I have others that actually take statistics up until a certain point of the game and take away a lot of kind of garbage time, and they account for they'll look at the third quarter scores of the NBA games and then just kind of make an adjustment for the fourth quarter, taking away some of the end of the games that are really non-competitive. So each one of our consultants has a different way of adjusting for them, but they don't get adjusted that much. I mean, the rankings for the top tier teams are pretty much the same from the beginning of the year, barring any big personnel changes like the Cavs. So that's a rarity.
The NBA is interesting that way. You can pretty much look at the future odds before every season, and one of those teams that is the top 4 ends up winning the title. Yeah,
it's been that way for like the last 10, 15 years. And like I said, in take some of the other sports, hockey, baseball, we've had some teams that were 200-1 the year before. The year the Tampa Bay Rays went from last place to first place, they opened up the season at 300-1 and made it to the World Series before losing to the Phillies. I can't remember the last time we got an NBA team that went that same way, especially with the same personnel, going from 150-1 or 200-1 before the season and then winning the title.
All right, Scooch, I got to bounce to go call Ryen Russillo for the next part of our podcast. But before I go, if you're looking at the NBA and you could tell me one team outside of the 4 that you think is the most interesting from a value perspective. So let's say the 4 are Celtics, Cavs, Rockets, Warriors. Give me the one team outside the 4 that a bettor should look at for value.
Boy.
I got an answer.
Right.
I got an answer.
Yeah, I'll say Toronto.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some value there. You can get Toronto at about 12-1 right now. I mean, they're playing well, and they're in first place in the division. I think there's a little value there.
All right, Bob Scucci, let's tune in next week for more of the Scucci soap opera. I can't wait to find out what like February 20th is the anniversary of, and to hear how Jen feels about how your relationship is going right now.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Scooch, talk to you next week. Thank you. Enjoy. Hey, listen, happy Valentine's Day to you and your bride.
Hey, same to you and everybody.
All right, joining me now on the buffet, honestly, a guy who is probably the best reader at ESPN, who asked the smartest questions of every writer who ever came on his radio show, Ryen Russillo, who is on his basically first day in LA right now, has a tremendously popular podcast on ESPN. Now he's joining me on the buffet. What's going on, brother?
Nothing, man. I'm hanging out with my new spot here, the Equinox, it's funny. I almost joined this when I lived in West Hartford just because I like the gym so much and was going to drive down to Greenwich like once a month. And then I go, okay, that's kind of a loser move to join a gym that costs this much to use it once a day that you have to drive an hour and a half to. But now I don't, because it's just up the street, and I'm pumped, man. Really happy.
So you had to move 3,000 miles away to join the Equinox. That's essentially what you're saying.
That is a very efficient way to put it. Yeah. But I like the surrounding area a lot too. So
Well, congratulations. So one of the things like I wanted you to come on the podcast is because we have a segment on the podcast called You Bet Your Life. And I basically say to someone, tell me about the biggest risk you've taken, and then what happened next. And then there's the factors that went into making that decision. And so we were just talking for 20 minutes before we even started really officially recording. And we were talking a lot about this writer, Eric Larson, who you're reading right now, who I love, who writes these great nonfiction books. And most famously, he wrote the book Devil in the White City. And, Grinnell, who's producing the podcast, this is like an easy way for him to bring that in right now. So Grinnell, you can just drop that in there and then we'll find a way to get out of it.
I was reading that Eric Larson, Beast in the Devil's Garden thing about the U.S. ambassador to Germany and his family living over there prior to honestly, like Devil in the White City and Dead Wake are way better. This is thorough. I can't imagine writing one of these books. This freaking guy goes through like everybody's diaries and then lines up the timeline. The book itself is kind of boring, but like the lead up to Hitler's Germany is incredible because he just was like, all right, I'm going to go first. And he started killing other Germans. Before we're even talking about the horrific things he did after the fact. And they just started killing out anybody that could challenge him in different factions. And people were like, wait a minute, what's this guy doing? And then they had a press conference. And he's like, yeah, it was all legal. We passed the law the day before, so we're good. Moving on. And I was like, right. Jesus, this is crazy. But the rest of the book wasn't worth it.
So one of the books that I've written was a book called The Detonators, which I think we talked about, which was about these guys who this like terrorist attack in New York Harbor in 1916 that blew up downtown Manhattan. And it was all pulled off by Germans and by the German army prior to World War I. And so the case itself like extended into World War II and sort of the U.S. having to deal with Germany and Hitler and all the subterfuge. The research I did for that book, like how to write a book like that, which you're probably going through a lot of this now, was Devil in the White City. And he also wrote another book about like a hurricane that devastated Galveston. And
Thunderstruck?
So, yes, I think, Thunderstruck was Thunderstruck I think was about electricity.
Was it? I know he has another one. When you talked about a storm, I just figured, okay, I'll throw Thunder. Because I know he has one other one that I haven't read or two other ones that I haven't read.
He's got like 6 or 7. And I think his first one was about this hurricane in Galveston. I read that too. And they're amazing. And he's phenomenal. The way he does a narrative with sort of nonfiction is, if my book had sold, I'd be doing that instead of this. He is like awesome at it.
I just can't fathom being that good at, like, he must love it. Like, he must, the people close to him must go, okay, he's doing another one, and there's no way to get around this. The detail, the color of the scenery that he's describing, and then it's all real. Like, one person I'd known who read Devil in the White City didn't know it was nonfiction.
Yeah.
I was like, no, it's real. I can't wait for that movie. And I love that whole book. I mean, I loved it because I actually enjoyed the architecture thing, even though everybody felt like when they were reading the architecture chapters, they just wanted to turn back to the serial killer stuff. But it is funny, though, I think I shouldn't say funny, but after all, like the Churchill love, that after reading Dead Wake, like he basically was responsible for getting U.S. involved in the First World War because he just was like, yeah, we're going to let this submarine blow up this ship, and we're not going to warn anybody. We're not going to warn the ship. I mean, I feel like that's what he's alluding to there.
Totally.
But yeah, where he's just like, okay, so the only way to beat the Germans is we're going to get the Americans involved here, and by getting the Americans involved, we won't tell one of their ships that German subs are all over the place waiting to take these big passenger ships out. And it's just crazy that you're like, oh, man, like talk about, and yet he's a hero. Like Churchill's considered a hero. And I don't know how that would play today. We'd have a massive, like people would tweet like crazy that he wasn't a hero. I know that part.
Well, if you've seen like The Darkest Hour, which was that movie that just came out about sort of how he managed World War II, there's that whole scene where he basically goes on the radio and lies to the British public about the status of the war and Hitler and how everything's being responded to, completely bald-faced lies about it. And he still goes on to be the hero.
No, it's a really good point, because I always wonder, like, okay, what are we being told? How much are we being lied to? And do we kind of deserve it? Do we kind of deserve to be lied to? Because if everybody in power told us the truth of every single element, every single decision along the way, and we sit here and debate all these things, it'd probably get in the way of any kind of progress. But I'm sure some people would listen to this and be like, no, we deserve the truth. We deserve to know every single time. It's almost like a trade, you know? When a guy gets traded, he always gets really pissed off about it and says, oh, you know, they were shopping me, and they weren't even man enough to tell me, and then they didn't tell me face to face or blah, and all this stuff. And it's like, if I were a GM, I wouldn't go to every practice and be like, you know, to my second best player or whatever, and say to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example here, Danilo Gallinari, and be like, hey, Danilo, I took a call today. I had a call from another team. They made us a trade offer. I did turn it down, but I will keep you posted because I want you to always be in the loop and us to not, like, that's not realistic. You know, things don't really work that way. So when I think of, like, history and, you know, when I read post-Obama stuff and the involvement in the Middle East, and I don't know, maybe I'm just too rational about some things, but, like, I'll listen to or read about some sort of military decision that people after the fact will just crush Obama for. I'll be like, well, I can see how we get to this kind of crossroads and said, I'm kind of screwed either way. So I can arm people or I can not arm people. And if I don't, and then there's an uprising, then it's my fault. And then when I arm people after I said I don't want to put more guns in this part of the world, then I'm wrong there. So you know what? I'm just not going to put more guns over there. And I'm reading it going, yeah, maybe it didn't work out, but I can totally understand how we came to that point. So I think it's really funny the way we kind of look at history. And I don't know. I guess I'm almost arguing that maybe we don't deserve to be updated on every single thing that's impacting the world.
Well, you can't do your job as a diplomat and as a politician and as a world leader if you are trying to constantly figure out, how am I going to frame this very nuanced, challenging subject for an audience of, you know, hundreds of millions of people that don't understand the full context and don't understand the relationships and haven't played the game of chess to the point where we know what the next 5 moves are with either decision and what the calculus is in those risk factors, and saying, all right, if we go this way, this could happen. This is sort of a proportional response, or this is a challenge that this is an outcome we can live with, even if it's bad. Like, you just can't explain that to 300 million people. Like, you can only do it after the fact, which is why you get this sort of big addresses after, you know, bin Laden's been killed and why we made the decisions we made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, right. And at that point, too, you're just going, all right, you know, despite everything being such a battle and how people see things and say, well, you should have done it this way, or why did you not think of this, or you should have handled this. I mean, there's nothing easier in life than after something happens, say, oh, no, you should have done it. You should have done it all these different ways. Like, I hate when we have, like in sports, we'll have somebody apologize for something, right? And a guy screws up, he does something wrong, then he apologizes. Okay, so now we get to just rank it on sincere rank. Like, in the sincere meter, where are we at, 1 to 10? Okay, well, he wasn't super sincere. Then we have the body language expert come on and be like, you know, when he turned his shoulders in, that means he's lying. And you just go, all right, okay, let's keep doing this. So you're right. So when something like bin Laden happens, you're going, all right, bin Laden's out, and this is huge for us because now we can go up and we can, you know, stick out our chests. And like, I would hope, and this is me speaking as if I were a politician, going, I would hope that there wouldn't be a thing after the fact going, hey, was this handled the right way? And of course, that's actually what happens. And that's why, you know, to be a politician, you know, I always kind of think it's funny that people go, oh, I hate how politicians talk, or I want somebody real, or I don't want somebody who's part of the system, part of the machine. I go, you know what? Politicians talk to us this way because that's the way we have to be talked to. Like, we sit there and we pick our side, and then we completely sell out for the one guy and then rip the other dude who just isn't aligned with my ideology. You know, that's why I think it's always so funny, because I listen to these guys and I can't stand them. You know, I'm not very political at all. I can't stand these guys. They insult our intelligence for the most part. But they talk to us this way because if they can bend something in some angle that their base still supports, they're like, yeah, I'll just go with this. Like, this is BS, but at least I know my base is still going to believe it, so I'll just say it this way. And then everybody complains about the way this stuff is relayed to us. And I go, yeah, but if they told us the truth all of the time and were totally frank, we would crush them for that too. The same way we do it with athletes. When somebody goes, you know what, I don't think this team is any good, or you know what, I don't think we can win with this quarterback, or I'm not sure that our coach puts us in the best position to win. Like, we ask for all that sincerity, but as soon as we get it, we go, I can't believe that guy was so forthcoming.
Absolute truth, man. You can't win with that. And you are incredibly passionate about writing, and that's one of the reasons you're in LA. So tell me about the biggest risk you've taken and what happened next.
Well, this is it, man. I mean, when people talk about getting involved in sports talk and getting a show, I wasn't risking anything. I was a bartender, living above a restaurant that served terrible pasta. I was still going to school in the town, or I was still working, still bartending in the town that I went to school at. And, at first it's like, hey, this is fun. I have a nice little life. I love Burlington, Vermont. And then, a few years go by and you finish school and, your dad starts asking you tougher questions about your plans for the future. And you got classmates coming back up to visit with a fiance or somebody that's about to be a fiance. And I'm pouring them Bud Lights and I'm going, all right, man, like, this is not the plan. And there's nothing against that. Like, sometimes I wish I could be just more content and more happy with simple things, but I've never been that way. And I know I'm never going to be that way. So, I got involved in sports and, the story, worked for a minor league team. And, I don't know, 15, 16 years later, I've left ESPN after 12 years at ESPN. And, the cool thing about the ESPN, I don't know if this is us taking a break from each other. I can use relationship analogies for everything, but I don't know, I just felt like the right time, and we've been actually really cool about it. This has gone much better than maybe I would have imagined. We've had some pretty honest conversations with people that make decisions over there that kind of understand why I made the decision I made. And, this isn't necessarily done, but, the reason I needed to do this now is that I feel like even though this is a much bigger risk, I just wanted to see if I could write TV shows. And I'd had some ideas that I've been kicking around for a while. I took a shot at it a couple of years ago. I had an idea. I wrote, I would say probably an embarrassing script, how bad it was, but I was just trying to figure out how to do it. Like, just because you read a Robert McKee book and buy the updated Final Draft program doesn't mean you're just going to bang out, a few good men. So, I guess, it's one of those things where, like, I kept telling everybody when I was bartending that I wanted to be a talk show host, and then I did it. So sometimes I feel really stupid about telling anybody what I want to do here and trying to write for television. But if it doesn't work, I'm going to be like, man, I told everybody what I wanted to do, and now I'm doing sports. Well, I think I would still do some form of sports if it's with ESPN, or if it's not. The podcast is going really, really well. So I don't know that would ever be a door that I would close, but I just didn't really feel all that challenged anymore. I really like doing the daily radio show, but I can't imagine what the feeling would be like to create something and to write it all down and then have somebody go, you know what, we love this and we want to buy it and we want to make this a show, and be able to say, like, I fucking created that, man. Sorry to swear, but, like, that's just how I feel, and that's what I want to do, and that's what I plan on doing. So I got really a bug a couple years ago and pitching to 14 networks and going 0 for 14. I didn't talk really during the pitch, and that always pissed me off. So I feel like if I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it more on my terms, or align myself with some people that are really pumped to work with me. And, that's what I'm doing. I wake up every day and I write, and I'm like the 7th draft of this pilot right now. And it's really hard some days. And some days it's a lot of fun when you feel like you nailed writing down a scene, and then a really established producer or writer sends you back notes and says, you're still not there yet. So I got some time, but we'll figure this out.
At what point, you had a radio show for a long time. It's going really well. You have this bug. At what point does the switch flip and you're like, I just don't want to do the radio show anymore? Like, I feel like the seesaw has gone to the other direction.
I don't, I'm always, I think a lot of people will want to ask me, what were you upset about with ESPN, or what were you mad about? I mean, a lot of the stuff I already said on the show.
Oh, no. That's actually not my question.
I know.
It's not about, like, what did ESPN do? It's like, in your head, you were probably very happy and thinking about, like, doing this for a while. There must have been something long before there was any interaction with ESPN where you're like, I think it's time for me to do this. That would be the impetus to even have a conversation.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to set that up. I know that you weren't, like, asking me to be like, all right, tell me who you don't like.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I didn't really feel like I was growing. And I don't really know that that's debatable. And people there have agreed. They go, yeah, probably right. So I put so much time into that show, and it was really the only way I knew how to do it. And I didn't have any balance, and I was living in Connecticut. I wasn't real happy, and I had always had this bug. Like, the weird thing is that right before I moved to Boston after working for this minor league baseball team, and that was 2002, I was working construction for my father, and part of my deal was they had bought this little beat up cottage, and they said, we'll let you live there for free, but you got to do the work on the house in the meantime. So, I'd get up and I would shingle, or I would do, some of the work around the house. I mean, the thing was kind of beat up, and, some other job sites I'd be out there. I remember one day I dug 8 dry wells off of this massive house he was building. And that was the worst, because you got to dig these trenches off of the rain spouts, and then you got to dig 36 inches down, 36 across, and run these trenches from the gutters off of the bottom of the house, away from the house, so that you have the water table, all pouring away from the house. And then you got to fill it with rocks and then cover it all back up. And I had to do 8 of those. And it took me legitimately an hour to do each one. And I came home, and this girl actually had come down from Boston to visit me, because she thought I was having this awesome summer vineyard life, and I wasn't. And I came back, and I was just covered. And I went, all right, I don't mind hard work. I've worked hard, for him most of my life. And then I just went, this sucks. What are you doing? I got to figure something out here. And as I was sending out tapes of my minor league baseball announcing, which wasn't that good, luckily I just had a deep voice, but I was writing this script in 2002. I was sitting there writing out this whole thing, and I don't know, it's just, how it is, right? You probably write, and then you probably have some other project that you use as a distraction from the thing that you're supposed to get done. Am I right?
Yeah,
you do
totally.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
for a long time I called it a full-time job.
No, but I mean, would you find yourself getting stuck on the thing that mattered and going to work on something that didn't matter, but it kind of helped you get the priority done?
Oh yeah, it completely focuses you. All of a sudden you'll be, for me, it's when I was editing at ESPN the magazine, and I was writing books on the side, but I'd write the book in the morning, I'd go to work, I'd write the book at night, and all of a sudden you'd be working on something, and your mind would be clear of sort of the screen in front of you, and you would immediately get a crystallized idea of what it is you're supposed to do in that segment of the book that you're trying to write that will help you get from point A to point B.
Yeah, because it sucks. It sucks so hard when you're like, okay, I know everything I want to do after this. I just have to get there. What's the perfect way to get there? And, when it doesn't happen, you just can get stuck, and you're like, great, an hour's gone by and my kitchen's clean, but I know how I want to end this, but how the hell am I going to get there where it actually makes some sense? So I was coming home, and, that was only 26. And I would work on that at night. I just needed a distraction. I needed to do something that made me feel like, okay, things are not great right now. Things are not working out. But you're going to be okay. And, we're going to swing for the fences here. And as I was writing that, and dude, in 2002, that thing would have been so bad. I can't even imagine how bad it would have been. I didn't really develop any B and Z storylines all that well. But it was fun. I really had fun. And then I ended up getting a job on the air in Boston. So that was it. And I didn't touch it again until probably a couple years ago.
It's so funny how those things happen, right? I remember when I wrote this book, The Odds, about guys who bet on sports for a living, and I got the book deal in 99. At the same time, I had written a TV pilot based on the first book I had written about playground basketball, and sent it to a buddy of mine who at the time was in development at DreamWorks. He ended up becoming the president of Paramount Pictures. And I sent it to him, and he ended up, he read it, and a month later got back to me. And he said, you know what, this is really good. There's nothing to develop here, but you should come out and try to be a screenwriter and see if you can make it. And
you could have done it.
I just got a deal for The Odds, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to do this book. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to do it. I went back, and I happened to, I was cleaning out, honest to God, before I took this job at the Action Network, I was cleaning out some old box in my basement, and I found the script, and I read it, and it was fucking terrible. Awful. It was cliche.
I did the same thing when I was packing up. I was reading. I had to put it down. I couldn't throw it away. I printed this shit out in '02, but I was like, oh my god, dude! Like, take your title page off at least.
Yeah, honest to God, it's you look back and you like, I can't believe I actually put that out into the world.
Yeah. Do you think your friend lied to you?
No, I think at the time, like, I was 26 years old probably, and it was probably good for a dude who was 26 and had never written a TV pilot before. And like, it was an area nobody was really addressing at the time, and sort of had cool moments that were very inside that, would take you into a different world, but it wasn't very good. Like, the dialogue was crappy and the scene setting was awful. And like, the situations were both at the same time cliched and entirely unrealistic. It was just bad.
Yeah, see, that's kind of my fear, is that, when I did the first pilot that I wrote a couple years ago, I was still with an agency, and my sports contract was coming up with ESPN. So I kind of felt like, hey, when I signed with you guys, at the time it had been 7 years or something. I go, I really signed with you because you guys are such big players in the television space, which is a huge word, as you know, out here. And I go, I really want to try to kick the tires on this thing. My contract's coming up. Like, I could see myself, maybe we can get something done. I might even take a break from sports. And they were like, yeah. I mean, look, every agent there's a reason they're agents. Unfortunately, I wish agents just go, no, this sucks. Total waste of time. Resign with ESPN. But they never want to do that to you because they're afraid if they say, hey, this sucks, there's going to be some other agent that's going to pick you off by saying, no, what do you mean you suck? That pilot's amazing. Like, this is a great, there's a need for this in this space. So they told me the first one was okay, but we had to read it all, and I agreed to all the changes because I wanted to see like how far we could go with it. And it was cool, sitting there with HBO, Cinemax, and pitching. It was cool, but unfortunately our story was a little too basic. And I think that's what kind of gets back to, like, when you're writing something, it's very challenging now, I think, because, the rules are so different, man. Like, one of the examples that somebody used for me was, you look at Breaking Bad and you go, okay, well, how was that pitched? And you go, all right, this guy, chemist, legendary chemist, really smart, has never smoked a day in his life, terminal lung cancer, going to die, decides to start cooking meth, but he's also motivated and driven by the fact that his other partners from college that were also really smart went into this company, killed it, and he's always had this jealousy and felt like, okay, I never went for it, so now I'm going to go for it. And you're like, wow, meth dealing chem teacher dad who's going to die in 6 months. That's just not the way shows were when we were growing up. Like, I had a friend who's a really accomplished writer out here who pitched some show about like a coming of age kid in high school, junior high, or something like that, and then they passed on it, and then all he did was change the timeline of, like, it was a jump back and forth timeline deal, and they were like, this is amazing, and they like picked up the second season, and it was the same thing. So sometimes when I write, like, I think my stuff's very straightforward, and sometimes I wonder, like, is that kind of lost? Can you just not tell some sort of story? Does everybody have to be an alien? Does something have to be like Mad Men could have been Mad Men even if Dom Draper wasn't a war deserter? Like, it still would have worked, but it probably feels like that if they didn't have this little hook, that there was some sort of mystery about him, maybe it doesn't sell, and who knows? Yeah, I think he brought that around and pitched it to everybody for years and years. But that's the part that scares me, because even when I can go back and read something that's terrible and go, okay, this sucks, sometimes you hit send on something you think is pretty good, and then, you still feel like you're not there. And that's definitely the scary part. And there's definitely going to be days, like I continue to have days where I'll go, man, did you know what you were doing here? Like, did you just think this was going to be cool and you were going to move to LA and like, man, I'm going to make TV shows? Like, I'm not doing this to tell girls at Starbucks that I'm a TV producer. I'm doing it because, I want to be good at it. Just like, I thought I was pretty good at what I did before,
Well, that's the risk. That's the you bet your life component to all of this, right? You actually, normally I do this interview with people and they have come out the other side and they get like what worked and what didn't, and they're happy to have taken the risk. You are smack dab in the middle of it.
No, but I'm not freaking out. Like, people called me the second week after I had left, ESPN. That first week's easy because I would have been off bowl games, holidays, the whole deal. And then that first week of January, I'm sitting in front of a laptop and you're 2 pages in. You're going, maybe I should add another paragraph about the temperature.
That is the loneliest. That is the loneliest place in the world, right there.
Yeah, and I live by myself. I'm in Hartford. I was like, I guess I could work out again today. And you get there. I mean, you kind of get there, and that's the thing is that I was pretty close to maybe being a general contractor. I even dabbled in health insurance consulting. Don't even ask. And I was like, if I don't try to do the sports thing, I'll probably divorce my wife at like 35 and freak out, and like move to Cabo. She'll get the house. And I go, so I need to try this. And so if I just stayed at ESPN and maybe, settled down with a cute girl from the gym in Hartford, I probably would have divorced her at 50 and moved out here and tried to do this anyway. So this is really more a real estate play where I'm not just going to lose half. Yeah, I mean, I look at this as I've already recouped the half I was going to lose in a divorce had I just stayed in Hartford. So really, I've already
really
won.
Costing you is a house in Manhattan Beach and a membership to Equinox.
Yeah, right. Because my dad did drop that on me. He goes, "Do you think if you're successful with this, that in 5 years you'll say, I'm not really happy, and I need to try something new." So I don't know. I mean, if I'd been killing it at ESPN, and I mean like a chosen one, a made man, maybe I don't do this. And maybe if I'd gotten that, then I'd miss out on all the great things that are going to happen here. Or, I mean, I'm just too realistic. Like I could sit here and do like the T-shirt, no days off, do your job, Shark Attack, whatever, and say, oh, I'm never going to fail. I'm never going to fail. I'm determined. Nobody wants it as much as me. I'm going to outwork everybody. Like, that's all bullshit. Like, it's either going to come up with a great idea and somebody's going to like me and go, yeah, I want to work with this dude, or I'm not. And I'm okay with it.
Well, that's also the thing about that job or writing books or anything in a creative space. You could outwork anybody. You could be twice as talented as somebody else. So much of that is about right book, right show, right idea, right time, right place. Like, look, Game of Thrones was not a hit the first 8 episodes it aired.
I gave up on it.
They gave up on it. It took off.
I could put subtitles on. I was like, what the hell did that guy say? This dude's a lord too? I was so confused. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Keep going, because that's your guy.
No, but the point is, like, then all of a sudden, they chop the guy's head off, and it's a game-changing television program that completely changes how people treat the heroes in a show and treat characters in a show and treat the relationship with the audience, because all of a sudden it's not an imperative that the hero survive every single element of every single scene.
Right, because in the 80s and 90s, we wouldn't have gotten that. Like all that stuff started changing, and Brett Martin, who wrote this unbelievable book on just the evolution of television, I think it's Difficult Men. He's this writer. I think he's down in New Orleans all the time. At least I follow him on Twitter, and he's constantly tweeting about food down there. And he's been really nice to me, and we've DM'd a little bit. And I told him what I was trying to do, and he was kind of like, hey, man, good luck. It's tough. I'm like, okay, thank you. But it's just, if you're interested in this stuff, it's incredible, because it just goes through how the rules changed with television, that we started rooting for the bad guys. And we knew he was the bad guy. Like, we were okay. Like, gets into The Shield and, spends a lot of time on The Wire and The Sopranos, and kind of how Oz started this thing. But you're so right in pointing out the Ned Stark thing, because Ned Stark, like, growing up, Game of Thrones, you go, no, Ned, like the guy from Lord of the Rings, he's a huge star. We have to keep him alive for 5 seasons, We got to keep that dude alive. And, same thing with Joffrey. We got to keep, it's funny because one of the guys that I met up with from HBO Cinemax after we failed our pitch a couple years ago, I said, what did we do wrong? And I'll never forget his quote. He's like, hey, man, we got shows about, like, freaking dragons and dudes that disappear. Like, congrats on your college drama, but did you see the dragons?
Seriously.
Did you see the dragons? And so then you're like, okay, well, what can I come up with that's so crazy? Like, what? All right, I'll start with dragons, but then it'll be from the future, but they don't know that it's from the future. And then season 2, mind blown, we're not even on Earth. And you're like, yeah, that'll work. And it'll take place in high school, small West Texas high school. Dude, your story about one of the guys, one of the creators of Game of Thrones is so funny when you told me that at dinner that I've repeated that to my friends. Can you share that with you? Because it's so funny that you grew up with one of the dudes.
Yeah. Dan Weiss, DB Weiss, who's one of the creators of Game of Thrones.
And for those that don't know, like inside the episode, he's the guy with the glasses in the beginning, so people understand.
Yeah, exactly. We totally grew up together. We were, really good friends growing up in high school, like a group of 10 of us who were really good friends. We're all still really good friends. I just, he just got this big Star Wars deal. I was just emailing with him about it. Like, crazy talented guy. Like, in high school, we would all hang out at his house, and he was not he's not a sports guy at all. And we would play basketball in his driveway. And he was up in his room writing novels. Like, he wrote this, I remember reading a novel he wrote when we were in high school about kids in suburban town. Right. And then he and I actually lived together in New York after college. We both moved to New York. And for that summer we lived together. And he had written a novel about werewolves that was just amazing. And all my friends, I'd be like,
the werewolf line kills me every time. It kills me.
Yeah, it's I'm like, you guys don't get it. He is playing a different game than the rest of us. Like, he is out there and super creative. And we all knew he was a really smart guy in high school, obviously. But it was he was just always writing these things that were so beyond the realm of reality. And clearly that has now manifested itself into, the most popular television franchise in world history. And boy, he's talented. And that's also welcome to it, brother. That's sort of the game that you're trying to play right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing you look at and you just go, can you imagine having to sit down and go, okay, you got to write out this script? And obviously they had the books to kind of go out there a little bit, but that stuff, forget it. Forget it. I'm writing about Martha's Vineyard in the wintertime, a world that nobody knows. There's no dragons. But
right, but also those things do well too. There are plenty of dramas that are not steeped in fantasy that do well. You just, if you're going to write a drama about Martha's Vineyard in the wintertime, you've got to have an anti-hero. It can't be some dude who's, it's got to be a guy who people might have to hate.
Oh no, they're not going to like him, but they're going to struggle with trying to figure out okay, is this guy truly evil, or is he somebody who's trying to get his life together? And that's, I started it with some spot, and I started in Montana, and then the guy that I'm working with was like, so what are you, an expert on Montana? You went there for 3 days. It's like, well, yeah, that's a good point. So, I change it to something I grew up with, because the funny thing about growing up on Martha's Vineyard and then meeting people is that they're like, oh, must be nice. And you go, no one has any idea of what the vineyard is. The vineyard is this self-sustained community where all class levels are represented. People don't understand that it's a lot more diverse than you realize. And when you show up, everybody's surprised that you don't have a sweater tied around your neck and, a sloop, 22-foot sloop out back, or multiple sloops. It's just not the way it works. And, in the island, in the winter, it's rough. It's depressing. It's weird, And I did it. I was in it for a couple winters when I thought oh shit, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be one of these guys. I'm going to show up to the job site, bitch about the Pats game on Monday. And then, I guess I wouldn't have too much to complain about the last decade and a half, but you understand the point. So yeah, that's the funny thing too, is when I'll watch Game of Thrones, because I'm rewatching it again now, I go, this can be about this mystical world and who's going to be the king and all this crazy stuff. But the premise is still the same. Everybody wants to be king, so I have to figure out, okay, what does everybody want? What's the problem, and is there a solution? And are any of these people interesting? And I think they are. Like, I think they are, but I also grew up around it. But I also think it's a world that would surprise a lot of people because it's a real problem on Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard. Here it is, like one of the most desirable places in the country, and the people that grew up there and the people that take care of it year-round can't really afford to stay there anymore. That's a huge problem.
So what happens now?
Today?
Yeah.
Well, today, I haven't officially moved out here yet. I'm waiting to close on the place. But I'm just going to keep plugging away. I've given myself, I have a timeline in my head. I don't want to hold myself to any number here, but I'm not going to be arrogant enough to be like, I'm done with sports, because it's just not. Like, I still think, I talked to a writer the other day, and he said, what do you think you'll do with sports? I said, I still think I do a podcast once a week with ESPN, or, if I'm not. And, like, why wouldn't I? Because I still have these nights where I'm watching so much NBA. I mean, I'm still watching as much NBA as I was before, and I think I'll still prepare for the draft the way I have before, because I love the draft. And I'm sure I can do all of these things because I don't have the daily show that is, I believe, like the most time-consuming thing. I mean, unless you're just a mail-it-in guy, you don't give a crap, and you just go, I'm going to take calls for 4 hours and show up 15 minutes before the show starts. But the way I did the radio show, I could never do it that way. So this is this weird freedom that, I don't know, I feel different. I feel happy, and I'm really pumped to try to make this work, because I don't know, I just have this weird feeling like deep down eventually it's going to work. So I'm not going to hold myself to some sort of timeline where it's like, okay, in 1 year, if you haven't done anything, you have to leave. Like, what if I like it here and I do something else? So I'm not going to worry about it.
You can't do any of these things like with a timeline like that, because what happens is, there's a sunk cost when you do that. And so you sometimes falsely account for the time you've spent and saying, I can't give up this time, but you've already spent the time, so it's gone. You just never, like, in that world, the time isn't necessarily the thing. And so you can't say it's going to be a 5-year thing or a 2-year thing or a 12-month thing, because you don't know what the next day is going to bring in an area where the work doesn't always pay off in sort of a linear equation.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. It could be worse in a year where I go, wow, I'm further away than I thought. But do I still like waking up every day and trying to think about this stuff? Yeah. But if I hate it, then I won't do it. And people always ask me about why I'm not married, and I guess it's kind of weird to be like, I just am so happy that I don't have somebody telling me, hey, what are you going to do if this doesn't work? Or, oh, you're going to write again today? Or, oh, you said you were going to give it a year. I'm impersonating the worst wife ever right now. But
I was going to say, like, your impression of marriage is not actually, like, my wife has supported me at every single, like, stupid idea I've ever taken. Hey, honey, I'm going to become editor-in-chief of the magazine, and we're going to move from our very happy life in Montclair, New Jersey, to the middle of Connecticut. We don't know anybody. Hey, honey, I'm going to quit my job making a ridiculous amount of money at ESPN to go work in this startup. What do you think of that? Oh, and by the way, my job's going to be in New York. Do we think we should move back or stay in the middle of Connecticut? You can get that kind of support too.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that's weird is that maybe this was like the mental break, and then ESPN and I go, hey, we both still like each other, and there's a role, and I go, yeah, I kind of miss it, and that's why it's been really cool that the breakup isn't official yet, because the contract still runs and I'm still doing the podcast. Look, if I had been married now and left the money, that would have been a weird conversation with a wife. She would have gone, are you serious? We're really doing this?
Oh, yeah.
And, then you're like, yeah, good point. I guess I'll stay. Pick out something nicer in Hartford.
Which, by the way, wouldn't have been horrible. Like, those are the things, like, you
No, it isn't. You're right. Yeah.
Account for.
You're smart to point that out, because, a challenging life at ESPN is still a great life. It just, I've never lived outside of New England, and I was in this area of the South Bay in LA for so long, just checking it out. And I go, just do it. Just do it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You don't like it? Okay. And I just don't see why I'm not going to like it.
Well, the good news is you're not married or divorced, and so you don't really have anyone to let down except yourself.
Yeah, and luckily I got this new house prior to meeting somebody who was my inspiration when I accept some award, an award show, unless I stay single. Wouldn't that be legendary? Just get up there and be like, I have no one to thank because no one did this except me. No one was my inspiration. No one guided me. I owe none of you nothing, or I owe all of you nothing.
I am my own man. You can all suck it.
Yeah, you can do it on your own. Never mind. I lost my. I just started thinking about being up there and laughing because who would want to be that big of a jerk? I would have done that maybe at 30, but I wasn't successful enough.
Well, I will tell you, when my buddy Dan accepted an Emmy, like he talked about Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and I emailed him. I'm like, I'm replaying it for my son because my son's a huge Dungeons and Dragons kid. And so like, I keep like, he's met Dan and like, they've talked about the Game of Thrones books together. And like, I loved seeing Dan talk about that on television because maybe my kid will get inspired to sort of figure out ways to use Dungeons and Dragons in a way other than sort of just playing the game. Ryen Russillo, you're out in LA. You're going to go make it as a television writer. I'm excited for you. I think it's going to be great. Either way, it's going to work out.
I really do feel that way. And I don't know that anybody would call me Tony Robbins. That's spent a lot of time with me. But I don't know, man. Every time I was out here, I get super motivated, and I'll do a million fake lunches for the one that works. So I can't wait.
That is a life's lesson. A million fake lunches for the one that works.